This week, we stay in the light. Hello, internet fans. It's your old pal Rottin Roger DeMarco here from 3bproductionco.com. And this week, we're going to be talking about Jonathan Liebesman's 2003 film, Darkness Falls. Okay, so here is the plot breakdown. Matilda Dixon is this old lady who likes to give children money for their teeth. Some children wind up missing and the town looks for a scapegoat. They find her, they murder her, unjustly so, because as soon as they finish murdering the innocent old woman, the children who are missing show back up. And Matilda Dixon puts a curse on the town of Darkness Falls. She's the Tooth Fairy. Pretty simple, like your standard ghost story lore, except with an awesome twist on the Tooth Fairy legend. So you're not supposed to see the Tooth Fairy. And Kyle makes the mistake of peeking and sees the Tooth Fairy and manages to stay in the light for 12 years, ducking Matilda. His childhood sweetheart's little brother peeks and sees the Tooth Fairy. So he comes back to try to save this little boy. Before I get into my overall thoughts of the film, first, let's take a look at
Ryan Rogers! Splatter facts.
We have 13 dead bodies. I know, for a PG-13 movie, that's fucking surprising. But since it's a PG-13 movie, we have 0 titties. No room for titties in the PG-13 scare world. Not even a good old side boob. We have gratuitous wailing. We have flashlight collecting. We have barroom bullying. We have 1 cat gag. And we have 1 rat gag. The methods of death include and are limited to off-screened, you motherfucker, and screamy pullaways. Yeah, that's it. People are getting pulled away. Yeah, gone. Sort of off-screen, but it's sort of on-screen. It's a different animal. Now, on to my overall thoughts of this film. I have a hard time understanding the hate for this movie, similar to my review for Return of the Living Dead 2. I saw this film in theaters. Yes, it's a PG-13 horror film. Yes, they changed the Tooth Fairy look last minute. They changed a lot of things, but the end film that we're left with is something that I really enjoy. It's not like a perfect film by any means, but it is a blast. It's super fun. It's as good as it's gonna get for a PG-13 murdering Tooth Fairy movie. I'm not real sure what the expectation for that criteria is, but this is pretty rad. We fast forward 12 years. So it's important for me to note that when the events happen at the beginning of the film, it takes place in 1991, which is evidenced by Kyle's sweet bedroom and his sweet Ninja Turtle collection. I was a kid growing up in 1991 who had Ninja Turtles. It's very nostalgic for me. But there's a spot where he leaves his bedroom and he runs into the bathroom to get away from the Tooth Fairy. And in the bathtub even, there are Ninja Turtles toys. And I'm like, see, this is a real kid. He plays with them in his room and he also plays with them in the bathtub. I don't know, it was a weird little set design detail that I really liked because we all play with our Ninja Turtles in the bathtub. I'm 34, I still do it. And as I was saying, this movie does a really good job for a PG-13 horror film creating an atmosphere, making shadows scary, making just a very simple audio cue scary. The noises that Matilda makes when she's in the room, it's sort of like a low growl, and then she ramps it up and does like a full-blown scream. It's creepy. It was creepy when I was younger. It's still creepy now, in the dark, surround sound cranked up, the noises moving around the room, very effective. And what they did to accomplish that is they literally went to like an old folks home and recorded elderly women in pain in bed. And so they take these noises, manipulate them, layer them, slow them down, speed them up. It's extremely unsettling. And another thing about this movie that I really like is that it definitely has slasher elements. It's very much paced like a slasher film. The only thing is, obviously, that she is not slashing people. A lot of off-screen death, a lot of things left up to the imagination, which, in the case of this film, really work, because you don't need to see the violence to understand that when they're being dragged off, it's violent. The noises do the murders justice. It's very classy for a PG-13 movie about a tooth fairy. I don't know what else to say other than it's done with a certain type of respect and a certain type of visual flair that make this movie fun and make this movie rewatchable for me, makes me like to introduce this movie to people who discount it because it's a killer Tooth Fairy movie. It's also important to say that the critics hated this movie. If you go to RottenTomatoes.com, you'll see that it got a 9%. 9% of people think this movie is watchable. And those are the 9% of the population I want to hang out with. This is a fun goddamn movie. I would really like to see the alternate cut of this film. They had a cut where Doug Jones played the Tooth Fairy, and the Tooth Fairy had a completely different design, had wings and really like purple, emaciated face. That was the original design, which if you need to see what that original Tooth Fairy looked like, look up the Movie Maniacs Todd McFarlane figures. They actually made a figure and released the figure while this movie was in production, and then before the movie got released, they reshot a bunch of stuff and changed the look of the Tooth Fairy. I would love to see that look. I would love to see the pacing and the direction that they went in that version. This version, they reshot a lot of stuff, changed the mythos almost. It would be cool to see the two movies side by side. I would love to see the differences. I would love to see Doug Jones being the Tooth Fairy. And I would like to see if it was a more violent film or if it was still classy like the one that we got now. And I say classy kind of loosely. I don't want to give off the impression that this is a super highbrow horror film, because it's not, but it has something that sets it apart. This movie does a really good job of nailing that psychologically damaged. Kyle is wrongfully accused. Kyle does not take responsibility for the actions of the Tooth Fairy. He pleads, he says, this is what happened. Well, you're crazy. No such thing as a goddamn Tooth Fairy. Go to the mental hospital, you nut bar. And they keep him there. And then when he is released, which I'm not sure why he's released, it's not like a good behavior thing. Maybe he tricked them into thinking like, oh yeah, the Tooth Fairy doesn't exist, I'm good. Then you still have the murder of his mother to deal with. I'm not sure why he got out, but let's gloss over that. This movie does a good job of portraying those damaged traits when he's a child, and then when Kyle is grown up, struggling with the fact that he has to stay in the light. He is terrified of the darkness, rightfully so. He's just trying to survive. He's not really doing anything with his life other than surviving, until he comes back to town because his childhood girlfriend Caitlin's little brother is being plagued by the same entity. Kyle comes to the rescue. He believes Caitlin's little brother, so he's there to help to put an end to this horseshit once and for all. And the good thing about the character arc of Kyle is that he gets to prove to everyone who is discounting his story of what happened when he was growing up. He gets to say, I am not crazy. Look, this is happening. Most of the time, people don't buy it until it's time for them to buy it, if you know what I'm saying. But he gets that vindication of, I'm not crazy. See? Takes place in the town of Antonio Bay, or Darkness Falls. Very similar to the town of The Fog. Big giant fucking lighthouse right there on the water. It's got a secret past. A lot of parallels to The Fog. So you call yourself Darkness Falls, but I think you changed your name because you didn't want people to be reminded of what that maniac did here. That's a Friday the 13th reference. This movie does a really good job of capturing the fear of small children. Children are afraid, whether it's rational or irrationally, of things like the dark, of noises that they don't understand. And this movie nails that. You have no idea of knowing what's in those shadows and things like that. And it also does a good job of showing that the adults that are involved with the children, no matter how in control that they seem, they are really just as scared, or they're really just as nervous. They have no real answer for these things either, but adults will bullshit their way through it to maintain some sort of control. And I really like that about this movie. Is like, there's a noise happening and a kid is scared, and it's an adult's job to be like, it's nothing, I promise. And then toast. The villain can apparently be, maybe, I don't know. This is a question for you guys. Can the ghost of Matilda Dixon be in more than one place at once? Because it seems like she can just sort of be wherever she needs to be. And that is truly frightening, because wherever there is darkness, wherever there is a child losing their last baby tooth, she can be. Does a very good job of leaving you in the dark with that. Excellent. It adds to the mythos of Matilda Dixon. Has another one of my favorite things in horror movies, when the villain wipes out an entire police force, shows up to the police station, and fucking smokes everyone. And that's awesome. Really fun assault on a police station. You know, you're supposed to be safe there. That's the end-all be-all of safety, the police station. Nope, doesn't mean shit. Doesn't mean shit to the Tooth Fairy. Gone, toast. One of the things that does sort of irk me about this movie, just a little, is during the climax they go to the lighthouse so that they can turn it on and keep Matilda Dixon away. And there is a slight gas leak in one of the hoses. The generator won't turn on. And that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. They go down, they tie a piece of shirt around it, and then it starts right up. That's false. There's plenty of gas in there for that to work. It just wouldn't run as long. It's one of those little things where you go, really? That's the get them from point A to point B, put them in peril, is that the fucking gas hose is leaking? It's also important to note that when they changed the design of the Tooth Fairy from the winged creature that we don't get to see, Stan Winston took over. So Stan Winston designed the look of Matilda Dixon under the mask, and the reveal of what she looks like under the mask is incredible. We only get to see her for 30 seconds, maybe, but it's effective, and that makeup will stand the test of time. It's disgusting. It's shocking when you first see it. You go, Jesus Christ. Stan Winston, all the credit in the world for stepping up mid-production and creating the look of Matilda Dixon. This movie did have a ton of working titles. First they called it The Tooth Fairy, and then they called it Don't Peek, and then they called it Fear of the Dark, and then they called it Tooth Fairy, The Ghost of Matilda Dixon, which is a long one. Doesn't really roll off the tongue. Then they settled on Darkness Falls, which is a great name. I don't really have a lot negative to say about this movie. I enjoy this movie more than the average horror consumer, apparently. I have a blast with it. I think it's fun. I think it's well paced. I think the creature is fun, and it has a decent body count. It's a different kind of animal, and it's fun. So if you haven't seen it, I fully recommend checking it out. If you have seen it and you know someone who hasn't seen it, and you think this might be right up their alley, sit them down, get your popcorn, get your candy, get your soda, rot your teeth so Matilda Dixon can come get you. In my personal opinion, as far as a rating goes, it is 100% popcorn as fuck. It's a blast. It doesn't have to be highbrow. It doesn't have to be the greatest gore-filled splatterfest in the world to have a fun time with. And this is a fun movie with a sweet-looking villain that swoops in and fucks shit up. I can't recommend it enough, guys. So if I have swayed you and you don't own it, click the link in the description and get a copy of Darkness Falls today. But I suppose I should probably get going because, after all, there's a lot of movies out there and somebody's got to watch them, so why not me, right?